let's be reductive, like how we introduce ourselves to folks in the industry. I'm Nathan Roberts, and I'm a composer and sound designer. I'm also the DUS and production manager for theater studies at Yale.
I'm Alan Edwards. I'm a lighting and set designer, and I also teach at Yale.
I'm Jenna Woods. I'm a theatrical and dance stage manager and event producer.
I'm Erich Bolton. I'm the projection supervisor at Yale Rep. I teach at the drama school. I teach in theater studies. Basically projection for the most part, control systems, and then also I'm working in a consulting firm designing theaters and lighting and sound and video systems, and also working in a shop in New York designing automation and sort of that stuff for Broadway and other projects.
Is that it?
Also the conference coordinator for USITT's annual conference.
This isn't a bit we prepared.
No, there's a few.
Yeah. I'm Itamar Moses. I'm a playwright and sometime television and screenwriter.
And we'll be joined by Sarah Holdren, who will tell you about herself when she gets here. And I realize now I should have also asked you to tell us about your Yale affiliation, because we're all alumni of some flavor or another. Let's start with Itamar and work our way back.
I was an undergraduate here. I was in the class of 1999, and I was in the residential college that shall not be named until its name is changed. Which I will not donate any more money to Yale until they change it.
I graduated from the drama school in 2011 in technical design and production.
I graduated from drama school in 2010 in stage management.
I graduated from the drama school in 2011 from the drama school.
In what discipline?
Oh. What does it say on a diploma?
Design.
Does it say lighting design or does
It says
it
design.
say design?
It's design or scenography?
Does it really say
I think it's
scenography?
scenography. It's lighting design.
So,
And I graduated in 2010 from the Yale School of Drama with in sound design. Okay, cool. So I would like to have us go around and just because I think this will give our guests a chance to know more about us and what brought us to this room at this very moment. So if in like 2.5 minutes you can trace your career path from the first time you stepped into a theater or thought about a theater to this moment where you're sitting in front of our undergraduate friends to talk to them about career options in theater. And I will take volunteers. And you know what? If like a pop-out question arises from the audience, I will entertain it because we're just gonna play it that fast and loose. So who wants to go first with their 2.5 minute bio?
I'll go first.
Thank you, Jenna.
I feel like I've shared a lot, so it's semi-prepared. I, in high school, got involved in theater, got the bug, did what I called at the time stage management, although there was no oversight. So as I was telling Nathan earlier, who knows what I was actually doing. They called me a stage manager, and I might have called some cues. That's about it. And then pursued that in college as well. Again, there was no formal training. My undergrad degree from the University of Kansas is actually in theater design because it was either that or acting, and I knew I did not want to be an actor. Just not my bag, and I don't think I'd be any good at it either. So did that. When I was in undergrad, I went to USITT. They have a great program for young stage managers where you actually go and it's called the Stage Management Mentoring Project. And you are paired up with professional stage managers who come to the conference, and you actually stage manage some of the events there. So you both get to work, you get experience, and you get a professional to talk with about that and whatever else you want to do. It was great, really great. I did it 2 years in a row, and through that, I met a production manager with a touring company who hired me when I graduated to do a one-nighter of Footloose, where my job description, I was both the ASM and the props supervisor. Small show, obviously. It's a great experience. And then from there, I did 6 years of touring as a stagehand. I joined IATSE, I worked in props, and then I did 4 years with Riverdance as the wardrobe supervisor. And after doing that for a while, I realized that the road it can be an awesome place. It can also totally take over your life and become kind of like this weird fantasy world where you never have to clean a toilet. And I wanted to get back into real life. So I applied here also to get back into stage management because I really missed the being a part of the overall production and not just my one little world. So I went here. When I finished here, I moved back to New York City, and I've been working mostly as an off-Broadway PSM. I've done a Broadway show as a PSM as well, and then a lot of event work, both as a stage manager or a producer. And then I spent a couple of years touring with a small dance company out of LA as their stage manager. So a lot of freelance, and I like to mix it up and keep my hand in all of those different things.
Thank you, Jenna. Are you Sarah?
Yeah.
Hi, Sarah. I'm Nathan.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
You haven't missed much.
Great.
All we've done is go around the room and we've introduced ourselves to the students by what we reductively tell people we are in the industry. So I said, I'm Nathan Roberts, and I'm a composer, sound designer, and teacher.
Great. I'm Sarah Holdren, and I'm a director, theater person.
And what's your Yale affiliation?
I went to undergrad here and majored in theater studies, and then I went to grad school here and got an MFA in directing.
So now we're at the phase where I've given our distinguished panel the task of giving their bio. And 2.5 minutes, what brought them from the moment they first caught wind of the theater and to this moment where they're on stage talking to the next generation of theater makers.
Well, Metro North brought me late. I'm just kidding. Okay, so, cool. Hi. So I'm Sarah. I think I started getting into theater in early high school, around the time when it became clear that I wasn't going to be Keira Knightley and bend it like Beckham. And Shakespeare is really where I have come from and where I sort of always go back to. I started directing Shakespeare in undergrad. The first play I ever directed was Richard III, and have been really obsessed with kind of creating wild adaptations of classical theater is kind of where my heart is. So I'm not super big into the new play world. What I prefer is a kind of mixture of classical texts sort of messed with and contemporary ensemble technique. So my background is in a whole lot of classical work, and then also a weird amalgam of experimental theater training and physical training and viewpoints and Suzuki and devised stuff. And I kind of like taking those seeming polar opposites and making them work together. After undergrad, I didn't want to go to New York because I have an issue with doing things that are probably good for my career. And so I went back to where I'm from, which is Charlottesville, Virginia. And I just made my own work for a really long time, which was great. I met a bunch of like-minded artists and was in a small enough place that I could be in control of everything, which is what I wanted. And then after about 3 years of just sort of picking the plays that I wanted to do with the people that I wanted to do them with and putting them up on my own in small spaces with not a lot of money, I still really loved doing that, but it was starting to feel small environmentally. So then I applied to grad school, and I ended up back here for 3 more fun-filled years in New Haven, Connecticut. And grad school was great for me. It was complicated and crazy and huge, but also really great. And I feel like the people I met here are a huge part of wherever this thing called my career is potentially going. And I graduated in 2015. And then after going to Moscow for a little while, did in fact move to New York. In the interim, I also was the artistic director of the Yale Summer Cabaret. So that was cool because that was was training wheels for running my own company, which is what I've actually always wanted to do. Now that I'm in New York, I have done the Drama League Classical Directing Fellowship, and I've founded a company called Tiltyard, which is dedicated to the kind of work I just described, sort of a combination of reimagined classical stuff and ensemble-driven new work. So not necessarily new plays, but new pieces. And we just did our first show last fall. It's this like wacky version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Probably very like dissimilar to most Midsummer Nights, I hope. Anyway, dissimilar to most Midsummer Night's Dreams out there. We just did that in the fall. We're now in like the stage of trying to apply for every single residency and grant that exists. And I have a day job, and you know, and that's where it is. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
So it's hard to remember when I sort of started theater, somewhere in late elementary school, sometime maybe middle school, sort of stage managing, you know, holiday concerts, the lighting, the sound, you know, as projection came out, anything that had technology that nobody knew what technology was. So that sort of spilled into high school where I did everything. We had new theaters that we opened up, and I sort of got to run them and sort of say what we wanted, and that was exciting.
Where are you from?
From Southern California, just outside of Palm Springs. So there was a lot of arts around, but there wasn't sort of the technology for that. So then I went to college for computer engineering with a theater minor. I didn't take a single acting class. I didn't take a single, you know, anything but sort of sound design, sound engineering, lighting design, lighting engineering, all while doing sort of engineering full time. And I found that I always really enjoyed theater. I enjoyed the challenge. I liked the people. In the engineering world, I didn't as much. It was really boring. It was, you know, a long-term project for any of you who probably are taking engineering classes. You know, the timeline is 6 months to a year, to 2 years, to maybe 10 years for a project. And I really enjoyed that. Here's the idea. In 4 weeks, we're going to put it on stage, and you really have to think quickly. So I sort of throughout undergrad, I did both of those. I did more shows than I could count. I straight out of undergrad applied to Yale for grad school and came here not really knowing what I was going to do, but knew that if it didn't work out, I'd go into the computer world. You know, the network management or design or anything like that was sort of the fallback plan, and things sort of fell out here ever since. I came here in 2008 with sort of a couple of other people on the panel and sort of really met everybody else in theater and the full, you know, what are all those other departments outside of, you know, what I'm used to doing. You know, you might do it all by yourself, but to work with 8 other departments with so many people, I think, 180, about 180 students total, you know, who are only here for theater, for their career, you know, sort of shaped, you know, what all those facets are. And then in the summer of in between my second and third year at the drama school, I went into New York to Hudson Scenic. They had this little show called Priscilla, Queen of the Desert that they needed. There was a bus with about 30,000 LEDs on it, and they said, we need somebody to deal with it. And I sort of dealt with it all summer. And it was a really sort of exciting world into commercial theater, into big budgets, into what, you know, technology can do on a really large scale. And ever since, when I graduated, I started teaching here, and I've continued to work at Hudson. I've done quite a few Broadway shows, not the full show, but little pieces of it in the shop. As many productions as we've done here, overseeing the projection department as it's grown, overseeing the animation department, and really enjoy the sort of engineering challenge of somebody saying, you know, the artistic team saying, this is what I want. You know, and typically it's a crazy idea, and you look at that challenge and you're like, this is crazy. And anybody else would laugh at you, but how do we make that happen? And how do we look at it on a budget, on a scale that, you know, we can accomplish? How do we figure out a clever way to make it work? And to do that. So I've been doing that here. I've been doing that for Hudson Scenic in New York. And I just, I guess about 6 months ago, started working for a consulting firm, designing spaces. And, you know, you walk into a theater and you say, well, this is terrible. Why is this designed that way? Well, at least, you know, 5 years from now, you could blame me. Because I'm the one working on that. But always in the technology sort of side of things is what's sort of really interesting to me, and which is the way that my career sort of been to this day.
Thank you, Erich.
I am originally from the Bay Area, and I came to theater sort of because first I had a very general notion that I wanted to write, like I wanted to be a writer and make things. I think just because I like to read. And I was like, if I'm a writer, it'll be the same, which it's not, it turns out. But so I did that, and then towards the end of high school, I started going to see a lot of stuff at Berkeley Rep and ACT and like the great theaters in the Bay Area. And I saw Angels in America, which had already been on Broadway, but it was back at ACT at that point. And also there were a bunch of like really cool kids. I went to Berkeley High School, and there were a bunch of like people who were 2, 3 years older than me who would do these cool plays that they made themselves, these rock operas in like a basement of a pizza place in Berkeley, called Laval's Subterranean Theater, which is still there. And it was sort of percolating in my head that like theater was cool, and all the people I knew who did theater were like the coolest people I knew. So misleading. But anyway, then I blacked out for 15 years. No. So by the end of high school, I got really interested in playwriting, and then I came here. And Derek and I were just talking about this, that it was like more, because we were classmates. We were in DS together, we realized. But undergrad theater, I guess, is a little bit more organized now than it was then. But then it was
real.
Yeah. But there was a lot of it, but it was just like, it was just everywhere. There was like the Dramat and like the Sudler funds for every college, and the drama school who were like too cool for us, and then like, it was just. When were you here? When were you an undergrad?
I graduated in 2008, but it was still like,
okay.
It was still like way less monitored than it is now.
Okay, so I was in here in the late 90s, which was like the Wild West. We didn't have Facebook. I was up here mentoring for the Yale Players Festival a while ago. I was talking to some undergrads, and they were like, so you didn't have like Facebook or Foursquare? Like, how did you plan how you were going to meet each other? And I was like, I guess you just wandered around campus and like saw who you ran into. And they were like, that's so cool. Sort of romanticizing, anyway, this is not the answer to your question. So I was here, and by the end of college, like it became my main extracurricular. It was like all I was doing here other than class, and often instead of class, was plays and being in plays and doing plays. And then I did the opposite of Sarah. I immediately moved to New York because I have an instinct for doing things that are good for my career, even if they're going to make me miserable. And then I was really unhappy for a long time. I went to grad school at NYU. I did the MFA first I was like an office temp and a theater intern for a year. Then I went to grad school. And then I just sort of started eking out, like stringing together the sort of ramshackle life of trying to be a playwright, like getting some regional productions and then eventually doing something off Broadway. And then it sort of became semi-self-sustaining, especially when I was very lucky because right when I needed it to happen, which was like around 2007, 2008, it was like exactly when television figured out that playwrights were a talent pool that they wanted to raid. So like all you had to say was like, I exist and I am a playwright in New York. And they were like, come to LA. So that was lucky. And so now I live in New York and write stuff. And I still basically think of myself as a playwright and theater as the center, but there's great stuff to do in television and film. The trade-off is basically money in exchange for ceding almost all of the control, like having to do what someone else tells you to do as opposed to exactly what you want to do. And you can do exactly what you want to do if you don't expect to be paid.
True.
Yeah.
Thank you. Alan?
I can't remember which one happened first, but in middle school, I either saw DuckTales and Bobby Sox, which was a play in 6th grade that my school put on, or I saw Beauty and the Beast at the Princess of Wales Theatre in Toronto. One of those happened first, and then the other one happened as a result of the other one. But I remember in Beauty and the Beast, I remember when, if you all have seen the original production or a YouTube clip of it, that there was a lot of special effects, and I remember right at the top of the show that I was blown out of the park with the Enchantress, the explosion and the Enchantress flying up in the air. That image is stuck in my head. It's stuck in my head now for 21 years. And so that started the thing, and then I did some stuff in middle school. I opened the Grand Drape. And closed it for, I think, the first 2 productions I worked on in my job. And then in high school, I was part of essentially a show choir. And there was nobody overseeing the lighting. I'm a part of a big music department. my music department won the Grammy Award, just for scale. But so we were doing these things, and there was no presentational aspect besides the close. So I started doing some lighting, and the choir director said, "This is great. You can do something for us." And then it became a paid position in my high school to do all the events that took place in the auditorium. And I lit a bunch of stuff for Spotlight Theater at my high school, and my drama teacher gave me a large budget my junior year to make a show, to make a portfolio to get into undergrad.
That's awesome. Where is this again?
This was West Henrietta High School.
That's awesome.
And my music theory teacher said that I was looking for schools and I didn't know where to look, and he said, "You're going to my alma mater." And he didn't say you should look at, he said you are going. And so I went and checked it out, and it was fantastic after looking at Cornell and Alfred and some other places. It was fantastic. It was Ithaca College, and the program there is amazing. I did that for 4 years and focused in lighting and set design. And then when I graduated from there, I had a job in New York, and I moved to New York in working for a set designer. And I don't like doing paperwork. So instead of going to lighting design, I went to scenery, because working for a scenic studio, there are lots of small positions. As a model builder, a painter, a researcher, the guy who organizes stuff, the guy who shops for modeling supplies, there's all these different positions that you can have ownership over that are not just sitting behind a computer. And from there, I met a prop supervisor on a show, and that took me on to 6 Broadway shows in props. And on show number 2 or 3, I was inside a casket, stapling it together, and it was like the 3rd all-nighter. And I said, "This is not going to be it." And so within a couple of weeks, I applied to Yale. The deadline was really soon after. I applied to 3 schools, Yale, NYU, and CalArts. And this one fit me. And then I got in, and then I proceeded to do more Broadway shows and props. But so I came here, and the program was fantastic. It was really hard, but it was fantastic. And graduated and moved back to New York, and for the last 6 years, I've been putting it together. And it's gratifying now, 5.5 years out, that it's really starting to pick up. Like for a while, I just didn't think it would, and I said, well, I can keep going like this, and then they say it takes 10 years, and so it's finally.
You got 4 years left.
I got 4 years left, and I'm not doing too bad. So.
And then what happens? Then you retire?
Well, and so in the middle of that, teaching has always been an interesting thing. I teach at Yale. I taught at the college in the fall, and the drama school this is my 2nd semester. And I've had 3 university jobs before this. And there's been something interesting about not just being out in the field, just doing, particularly when you're not doing at a large scale, and you're like, I'll never know what my idea would have looked like because we never get there. And then to sit in class, particularly at the drama school or in teaching, and just like meditate on the thing that you were trying to do. And really everybody just discuss in theory, and we're all out there together. We're way out there, but we're all out there together, as opposed to having an idea and you being the only one who ever knew what it was. Is that helpful?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I guess I'll do this too. I played the clarinet when I was a young man. I still play the clarinet. I had a show choir too in the junior high school, and that made me think I wanted to be an actor. So I went to the local community theater and didn't get cast, but it was Jesus Christ Superstar. And actually at that moment, I didn't even know that existed, that people would sing stories. Was like, I had never discovered a rock opera before. But the director of this community theater could tell I was, had some interest, and he said, "Do you want to be on the stage crew?" So I said, "Sure." And maybe we can get back to this at the end. What's the very first thing? I heard some of you say the first thing you did in the theater. For me, it was I crawled under the set because I was small enough and handed Mary Magdalene her vial of ointment to rub on Jesus' head. And I had to do it in such a way that I wasn't seen, and I was very proud of that. So I still thought I wanted to be an actor, and kept playing the clarinet and started playing other instruments, the guitar, which is a gateway instrument to all kinds of things with strings, and found myself in undergrad not quite knowing what to major in, so I was torn between the theater and the music departments of my school, a small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania called Albright College. My parents said, well, you have to do something practical, so we also want you to major in English. So I was English, theater, and music, and the whole time I was going between the both departments, taking lessons, and started acting, actually, in plays, and still thought I liked it. Got out of undergrad, was really, a reason I wanted to be an actor was I watched The Princess Bride and saw that sword play and was like, this is how I want to spend my life. Fighting six-fingered men with swords. So I went to Las Vegas where you do that. They had this program, the Society of American Fight Directors, like a really intensive stage combat training program, so I went out there to do that. Still thought I wanted to be an actor. Came back and joined a resident repertory company outside of Philadelphia, a very small place called the Hedgerow Theater. I mean, it was like a hedgerow, essentially. I think that's how it got its name. Cleaned toilets and parked cars and played roles on the main stage. Around that time, I noticed I didn't have the temperament to be a performer. I don't know what it was, but there was something about not wanting to have to, I mean, it's so funny because we still do it in our teaching, have to perform in the moment in front of people. At the same time, people were saying to me, oh, you're that guy I went to college with who played instruments and thought he wanted to be an actor. Do you want to make music for this play that we're doing in this tiny, tiny space in New York? This is before I even knew that sound design was a thing. So I started writing songs for these plays in these tiny, tiny theaters in New York and really, really liking it. I liked the idea that I could meet with some fellow collaborators, hear their ideas, not have to come up with it in the moment, but go away a little bit and work on it, and then come back with the idea and then further work on it. And then I took a detour and started doing literary management in a regional theater. Not sure why that happened, but it did. And I took another detour and started working in casting at a theater company in Philadelphia called the Arden Theater. All the while, people were asking me to write songs for their little plays in New York. And then I stumbled across on the interweb this website for this program at the Yale School of Drama in theatrical sound design. Before I really even knew, and I'm not just being naive, I didn't know that sound design was this thing. And I'm reading this description of the program and I'm like, oh my God, that sounds like everything that I've been doing. I think I want to get better at this. And this was, my God, a decade ago. And I came here and did that program and I just loved it. And ended up, I want to think I hold a record that I've worn more costumes at Yale Rep and Yale School of Drama than most sound designers. I tend to end up in the plays, playing instruments, and so yes, I am still performing in front of people. And I guess if I can do it through music and music and soundscape and not through text, I feel a little more comfortable. Have been doing that and still doing that, but found myself feeling lonely, missing a sense of ensemble. And when I discovered that the Theater Studies program at Yale was looking for a lecturer and a production manager, I applied for the position because I'd never been a production manager before, but I had been the beneficiary or the victim of a lot of terrible production management all over this country. And I thought, you know what, I can talk about this. And I did, and I feel like we are a resident repertory company of sorts. Like I look out across the faces in this audience, and we act and design and manage and direct each other's work, and that is what I find so satisfying, is being a part of a community again of art making. The designing in the field makes me a better teacher, and teaching absolutely makes me a better designer because you all force me to not take what I do for granted anymore. Like you're asking questions and I don't always have the answer, and I'm like, and I'm honest about that. Let's see if we can find out together. So that's why I feel so grateful to be able to teach here. Okay, so Derek has come up with some really good questions actually, and I want to get to some of them before we run out of time. Could you describe how your role in theater relates to the overall development production process? And I know some of you interface in multiple capacities, so perhaps just choose one, and I know it's project by project sometimes, but if we could just kind of meditate together on how we interface with the production development process of work.
I used to think that my job was reactive to the text or after a set design had come about. And we discussed this last semester, that now I think that I, more often than not, am throwing a wrench in the system to further discussion or to find understanding that I don't have. And it most often has nothing to do with the light. But as opposed to talking about the light, if someone can tell me, anybody on the team can explain something from a point of view and us agree, then that tells me what I need to do with the light. That's what I'm starting to think. I just throw wrenches.
I love that. I know in my own teaching of our students in design, I talk about the notion of service design and how we don't have to be just reactive in our work, that frankly, directors, at least the directors that I want to work with, want me to change their thinking.
Please God.
About the process. And not just wait for you to tell you, if you've already figured it out and you just need me to decorate it, then I'm not really designing. But that requires responsibility on our part. We have to be present. We have to be in the rehearsal room when we can, and there are things we can talk a lot about how the industry makes it hard for some of us to do. And not wait to just respond to a director's ideas, but to put our own ideas out there.
What I would add to that is that my girlfriend is a lighting designer, and one incredibly unexpected bonus of that has turned out to be that lighting doesn't, maybe it's just her, but I think I'm guessing this is a general principle, that lighting designers are like amazing dramaturgs in a very particular way, because they have to understand the text almost like a piece of music, like every moment of it and how it flips, more than a set designer, more than kind of more than the director, actually, in some ways. Like every single moment I have to, no, not more than that.
Depends on the director.
1% less than the director. But no, in any case, what I've discovered is if I give her something to read, it's not that, she's not even necessarily lighting it, but the way lighting designers read scripts, like if she bumps on something, there's a problem there. And it's just instinctive, she just knows. But it's because she's looking at it from this. So yeah, I think playwrights, in the production process, I think playwrights are often afraid to ask the designers what they think, because they know the designers are going to be right.
Well, I think we keep them separate too, in a really unproductive way, I think, in like a majority of our processes. I mean, like I have, I'm trying to like figure out ways not to spend this valuable time like complaining about the American theater, which is what I do with 90% of my time. So like to try to like rephrase it in like a positive way, I just think that like it's like we're really great. We love Henry Ford, right? In this country, it's like we love assembly lines, and we want to make plays the same way we make cars, and that makes good cars and shitty plays. And like, and it's just and what an assembly line does is that it keeps the component parts separate until the end. So it's like we've set up processes where very often like we don't even have playwrights and designers in enough proximity to have those conversations that you're talking about, which is really unfortunate. And like so often, I mean, my role, both I think in like a conventional setup and a more like collaborative setup, is to be the conductor, the orchestrator, like the person who is tied to every single other person in the process. But like I prefer it and see it as somebody who's kind of like leading from underneath, as it were, like not kind of, not like a hierarchy where everything comes down from above, but sort of like underneath the whole process and like kind of juggling everybody else so that everyone can be in a room feeding back to each other. And I think that's true. I think like the best designers I work with are amazing dramaturgs. Like, and actually everybody in the room has the responsibility of being a dramaturg is like the secret of theater. I mean, like some of the best TDs I worked with at the School of Drama were dramaturgs as well. They like didn't know it and weren't encouraged to embrace that fact about themselves. But like when their department wasn't around and they were finally like, I really don't think you should cut that hole in the stage because like there's a better place to put that thing. It was like, thank you, Jesus, like you're so right. That was a dumbass idea. Whose idea was that? It was mine. Okay, So like once we finally let people out of their, like out of those kind of boxes of like being afraid to overstep or thinking like, to interface with the play on like a content level or on a thematic level isn't my job. Like, oh hell no, like it's everybody's job. And the more theater can be made like that, I think, like the better it ends up being.
I think that's a great point, and I would love to work with you for that reason, because my position is not often seen as an artistic one. It's more of like a managerial, communication-based, sharing information between the different things, which of course is important, but giving the leeway to have an artistic sensibility in the room and also be a collaborator in that sense does help the overall production. Now, in my experience, it very much depends on whether the director is comfortable with that or not. Some very much are, and some don't want to hear it at all. But there's little things that I do in stage management life, like arranging for rehearsal props, that would suggest, like, what I work with a prop person to get into the room is going to have an impact on your rehearsal, and will, carry on the impact throughout the process. So I think it's a great point that like we're all collaborators, we're all responsible, we're humans, and so we're all making choices to put into the room. And do we listen to each other or not? And
well, it's like a lot. I mean, almost always. I feel like. I mean, maybe Eric, like maybe like you're going to be the exception in this like group, or whatever. But I feel like so often, no matter where we ended up, we all got into this because of the art side, right? Like we all got into it because we liked stories, and so like to tell somebody once they've gotten to like actually a really impressive point of professionalism in their career, like, oh, put aside that part that made you originally interested in the thing that you do. It's like not only stupid, it's insulting, and it's
detrimental.
And it's detrimental. Yeah, exactly. So,
well, I think I've been at the drama school for a long time now as a student, a staff member, and faculty member, and I've seen people go in, and sort of now my role is almost more advisor than anybody actually working on the productions. But I think what everybody's saying is really working together. And I could go into the engineering or the commercial world, and I do that a little bit, but it's sort of boring. I mean, it's exciting from a technology point of view, but it's in my office or something like that, and it's not interacting with people. And I think that's the part that I really enjoy about theater, is that you actually are having those real life interactions with people who are telling the story. And I think there's a different, as you mentioned, some TDs want nothing to do with the artistic process, and others are really involved. And I think I always encourage the projection designers and the sort of projection engineers, which are in a sort of strange place, is you have to figure out what your relationship is with the people you're working with, and that how do you collaborate and push forward the most that you can by not saying, well, you have to do it this way, or this is better, but to be open to who are those people around you, and to sort of put out feelers. Is this a team where I can really have that role, and I can sort of give a suggestion or a idea, or is it one where they're not really interested in that? And that doesn't mean I shouldn't, but maybe I'm a little more cautious about how I approach it. I go, I'll do it sometimes. It's a little weird being an advisor, in a student production or something. I won't, in a group, say, I think that's wrong, or I think this would be better. I might go afterwards and saying, hey, I noticed, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And that really trying to be positive about what you're saying and say, this might work better, or I think, I had a really great idea, this could work. That you can do that same thing, but it is a little different when you're sort of a engineering person or not seen as like the artistic sort of staff. For the artistic staff to feel different, and again, certain directors want everybody, and certain ones don't, and I think that's true of if you're a designer, you're a director, a stage manager, or anybody, you have different relations.
Yeah, I didn't actually answer your question from my perspective, which is like as the playwright, and your question is specifically about your role, your relationship to the production, right? So when you're alone, like at your laptop, when there's no production, you're the only person involved. You're right, if at least the way I do it. I don't tend to work in sort of a devised work kind of way, although sometimes I wish I did, because there's certain kinds of work that I think only come out of that. But once you've written the script and you're in the production, that it's an interesting question. It depends. There's a very broad rule that I've found to be useful is I seem to be most useful the first week, and then at near the end. And there's a big chunk of time in the middle when my best contribution is to not be there. Unless there's a serious problem, unless it's like, oh, this whole second act doesn't work and we need to like figure all of this out. There's a point where as the playwright, it's useful for everybody for me to go away, because they can then take ownership of it, figure out, and if I was there the first week to answer this or that question, if there is a concrete answer, or say, I don't know, maybe that could be a couple of things, and then just let them make it their own. And then I can come back having not seen anything for a while, and instead of incrementally living and dying by every choice, because they're going to try things. You know, a director I've worked with a few times, the note he'll use in rehearsal most often to the actors is he'll say things like, "Go too far with that. I want you to do it badly." And like, if you're a playwright, you don't want to be in the. You know that's hugely valuable, and you don't need to be in the room to see them like. Do it, you know, he's just trying to expand the emotional bandwidth of the scene to know what the edges are, so that, you know, because you can't like pump that in later if you haven't explored it early in the process. But I don't need to be there for that. I want to come and see the results of that kind of work and then be like, oh, I see it. You know.
But how do you feel about your relationship with the potential for design as you're creating? Like, if I were to think of the way that someone like Eugene O'Neill describes the not just the physical
right, like
world.
45-page open stage direction.
Yeah, like, but where the door is and like, you know, almost what size it is. And
he's wearing that derby hat with 2 flowers in it. Yeah.
Or compared to someone like Sarah Rule, who like, it's like you're reading a poem. But how do you think about the design possibilities when you're writing?
I've learned that I don't have an especially good visual imagination, and that like the less specific I am, the better, because specific about exactly how, because you don't even know what kind of a space it's going to be in, you know, and then there are all these people who are incredibly good at this stuff who will come in, and my job is to sort of make the dramatic event clear. Like what the emotional stakes are and what happens and who does it and then what happens as a result. And then to try not to, limit the possibilities of how that can be sort of rendered. Yeah, I try to stay, in terms of what I write in the text, I try to make it pretty minimal. And then sometimes you'll find sometimes just, you know, you're writing stage directions or whatever, and then you'll be in a production and you'll be like, why is that happening that way? And it's like, you said. He puts the glass down, like, oh, don't listen to that. Yeah, so.
And I just want to point out that, like, what you said about the stage manager not being artistic. I mean, I feel like 90% of what an audience sees for lighting is the decision of the stage.
And sound.
Well, that's
anybody time-based.
Yeah.
We have a special relationship.
Calling a show is an art.
We live and die by the stage manager. And you know what? The director's not going to be there. The stage manager is.
Well, it's funny though, because like for me and a lot of other fellow stage managers I know, calling it is like whatever. Like that's the easy part for us. That's the part that everyone else thinks is really magical that we do, and it is. It depends on the show, and certainly in dance it's a different thing, and musical is different than straight play, whatever. But for me, I think the art is more in personality management and resource management and communication. Like that stuff is much harder than calling the cues. So like while calling the cues is in the moment much more important for the fact that like I'm involved really, I guess more than anyone else, like in the entire length of the production. So like before, in the pre-production, and then rehearsals, and then tech, and then maintaining the show after the director is gone. Like maintaining a show is a whole other, like that's its own beast for sure. Like that artistic and personality stuff and running understudy rehearsals and all that, I think is much harder than calling cue. But it is true that like at different parts in the process, we have different primary functions. So like tech, it's like all about us, right? Like stage manager, lighting designer. I actually know a lot of couples that are stage managers and lighting designers. I think not by accident. Like they're just like attracted to each other in general. But hey, look out for them.
Well, but also, Anne, you were saying something about the TD, and you shouldn't cut the hole in the floor there. And it's interesting that, you know, there's 8 creative positions, 8 design or whatever, looking at the stage. But then there's a whole room full of people who are sitting there looking at it, and that is not their position, and they may have a valuable take, some fresh eyes. You know, the guy who's been building the thing in the shop, and now he sees what the whole thing is, and hears the text, and he might have something like eye-opening to say about it.
I think this is something that I've found gets easier with age. Early on, I don't want to say that I was afraid to be wrong, but I was much more conscious of this kind of imposter syndrome. Like, if I say something and then somebody else, a department head who is not even working in sound, points out a problem with that, will I be exposed for not having foreseen that problem? And shouldn't I have foreseen that problem because I'm the sound designer on this? And letting go of that need to be right, I think, opens us up for possibilities to be surprised by our colleagues and supported by our colleagues too. At the end of the day, I think we want to do the best job we can in creating an audience experience. And that often involves a yielding of what is precious to us personally in the work for the greater good of the whole. Blah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that, I don't know, people talk about, being egoless, and, I think that's a little bit stupid. It's a profession of egos, and, actually, it is, and it's actually not a bad thing. It's I don't want people to abandon their egos. That's part of what makes them, really interesting. But I do think that insecurity is the root of all evil. In the world. Our president. But I just think that is, that little demon, that thing that's if I let people see that I don't know, then I'm in danger. That just causes such infinite amounts of pain, which is so unnecessary and so avoidable from the very beginning. And I think it happens to directors a lot. Because obviously we're the ones who at least we think, that we're expected to know. Mm-hmm. And the worst directors I've worked with are the people who just pretend that they constantly know. And it's oh my God, doesn't it get exhausting? Doesn't it get exhausting for you to just sort of keep up this charade of always having to have the answer, when actually you could just look at the lighting designer or the stage manager or the TD and be I don't know, what do you think?
I also think that I guess so. I'm designing my parents' house, and the only thing that I'm trying to make sure of is that we at least thought about as much as we could. Then at the end of it, if it's built and they walk in and they're man, how come that's not over there? Well, we just didn't think about it then, but we've looked at every option, and that's nobody's fault. And we engaged the other 2 people or 3 people in the process the whole time. So, I like to walk in and say, well, we're just going to talk about as much as we possibly can between the 2 of us.
Yeah.
And well, that's what we're going to get. And if there's another person, let's discuss with them too. Not knowing, I think, is a great. Walk in and say, I have no idea.
Yeah, there's that awesome Tom Stopper quote. It's the best possible time to be alive when almost everything you thought you knew is wrong. Yeah, I think we're so uncomfortable about living in a state of uncertainty, and it's actually really productive a lot of the time.
This is a good one. Any recent or evolving changes in theater that you see impacting the way you work?
Well, I don't know if this is a relevant topic for folks in the room, but there's a lot of discussion in particularly New York stage managers about what we can and can't do because of what pays and what doesn't pay. So this is more like a career thing than a production thing. But there was recently kind of a shakeup and a push to get the off-Broadway equity contracts to pay more money. And I don't actually know what that agreement ended up being, but if it's significantly more, I think it's going to really change career options for actors and stage managers in the city, because a lot of us have just started turning work down because it doesn't pay as much as unemployment, which is a really sad state of affairs. So even if there's a couple of companies that I worked with when I first moved there after here that I love, and I'm invested in what they do, and I like the people there, and I would love to work for them, but I was going broke working for them. And to see that change in the industry, I would be good for everybody, including those theaters. I'm sure they don't necessarily agree with that, but that's a big change that I've seen happen very recently. I don't think that contract goes into effect until next year, but hopefully it will be good.
Designers are fighting on the same front.
Really?
Yeah. Are you aware of any changes that have happened
That have affected how
on a collective off-Broadway?
I mean, I know that I just did a show at Christmas time, and I actually legitimately needed an assistant. And we have an issue where designers are protected under the collective bargaining agreement, but assistants, unless the theater has to pay them, and many theaters refuse, no, I don't want to say most, many refuse to pay an assistant because they can't quantify the duties, and in order, an assistant has to be an employee, and an employee has a list of duties, and assistants, we have a hard time quantifying them because what they are is everything that you can't do at the moment. And that's a hard thing too. So the fact that I'm lucky that I have not worked for people who have put me in the position to have to get my own money from the theater. But for people, there are designers, there are career designers, and then there are career assistants and associates. And those people are just as important. And if this situation that I'm going through, having a hard time getting an assistant, affects everybody, then less work will get done. Me as one person, I can only do so much. And many people have assistants, and only in the theater are we having such a hard time getting them paid. They're doing valuable work, and also getting those who are in control of the money to see how valuable that work is. I mean, it'll be the day when a producer walks in on a show and the costume designer only has half the clothes because, well, that's as much as they could do as one person. While they're here at the theater, there's a person out on the pavement because that's how that job works.
Well, there's this thing that happens, I think, when we're trying to make our way in the industry. We're willing to make ourselves stand out by being the one who will do more with less. And that was a hard lesson. When I came to school here, I had done a few designs and compositions for regional theater, and I never acknowledged that I was doing two jobs. And it was the chair of my program that was like, when you are asked to create sound design and compose original music, you need to be paid to do both. And I said, but no, that's what makes me special. I'm the sound designer that can compose music. So isn't that a way that I make myself stand out? And he's like, you're the problem, because you're the one that's out there. You're rooting for everyone else by saying, yes, I'm the one that'll do this for less money. And it's tempting, especially as you're trying to build a career. And I don't know there is no easy answer to that.
No, although as you get from your 20s into your 30s, your definition of what constitutes a living begins to change.
Yes, there's that too.
Absolutely. So what does your union have to say about those two roles? Because they're not both covered, are they?
A composition, when I do a show, at least on a LORT contract, a regional theater show, my USA contract only covers sound design. There's a rider for the composition aspect of it. And so there's no collective bargaining at the moment for composition as it relates to theatrical sound design.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one that's sort of abstract and really hard to quantify, but that I'm in favor of. But the impact it's having is interesting. I'm not even quite sure how to talk about it, but I'm a straight white guy, and I think for a very long time, and still, there's this huge, and it's in TV, it's in movies, it's definitely in theater, though I think theater pretends it's not there as much as it is, but it fucking is. That voice is sort of reflexively seen as a default voice, and everything else is a niche, and that's beginning to change. It's just starting. And I can feel it, and it's really exciting. And I feel like the impact it's having is it's going to make people who didn't have to do this before, people like me, for instance, justify more why the stories they're telling need to be told. And I think there's some pushback against it because I think perception and reality are very different. And I think when people have been had an advantage for a long time, they perceive equality as an attack, and which is also why we have the president we have now. But that's the biggest, and it's like a sea change, but I think we're still at the beginning of it, and it's happening very slowly. But that's something I'm thinking about a lot. And the effect it's had on me is like, well, why this? Why now? Like, you know, which I'm embarrassed to say. I feel like I didn't have to think about as much when I started out, 10 years ago.
I think one thing that's sort of that I deal with maybe on a daily, weekly basis is that, in most productions you're going to have a lighting designer, you're going to have a sound designer, you're going to have a scenic designer, but you don't always have a projection designer. And I think, at Yale we're fortunate to sort of just be able to build those in, but not all the time. And so you have a discussion, let's say on a budget meeting, can I afford projection? And it's not so much a question about the art, does the show need projection, which feels wrong, and in the end of the day, in a lot of places, it's about the money. But how do I, as sort of an advisor, as a member of the faculty, if people like that say, I don't care about whether you can afford it or not, like, does it have any use in the show? Because if I give you a free designer and you don't need projection, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
If you don't need automation, why are you doing it? And it's, if there's the toy in front of you, you sort of want to use it. And it's a sort of tricky place to be because projection is typically not cheap. If you're going into New York, I mean, it's still the case that on a Broadway show, the projection designer's probably the last one in the room. And at some point, it's because the lighting and scenic and the rest of the team had a problem that they couldn't solve. And they said, well, maybe projection can solve it. And I think, one of the things that the drama school is really serious about is trying to change that and to sort of say, as what we've talked about, you're part of a team, that, you're part of the design team, that you should have as much input into what the set is as the lighting designer or scenic designer should. How does it really work together with everybody that's in the room? And I think that's a hard thing to come off of, and I think it's different depending on who you're working with. I think younger directors, younger teams are better to sort of integrate that. I think, directors who are older, who have been doing it for a long time without projection, have a harder time sort of bringing it in or just don't need it or don't want it. And I think the other thing that's been changing a lot is the plays that are written. A lot of the plays that we do at the Rep are new plays. It's over half of our season. And, they'll have 21 or 22 different scenes in different locations. And so it sort of works for projection very well because we can't physically fit the scenery in there. And so we think creatively, and projection would be one aspect of that, as much as sound or anything else to how you set where you are. And so I can sort of see, as we're looking at a season or two ahead, the show that has 22 scenes in different locations probably going to have some aspect of projection. I don't know what it is, but I could probably say that's a fact. Whereas something that is a box set and never changes, it might not have, at least from a starting point. But it's hard to say what it is and what is the vision of the team. It's really hard to decide, and hard as that projection person to say, does it need it, does it not? I think that the Wendell Harrington, who teaches projection design, she'll a Broadway producer will call her up and say, I want you to design projection for the show, and she'll say no. It doesn't need it. It's going to be terrible. And she'll walk away. I'm sure none of you and probably most people up here don't have the luxury to do that. A Broadway producer calls you up and says, I want you to do this. You're going to say yes. But to do it for the art and to do it for the purpose, I think we all want to make a living, but trying to navigate that boundary is hard. And there's not a great answer.
I mean, I also think as the wrench thrower, that if more people, if everybody, including the staff who choose the season before the creative team of the production is brought on, if they spoke in the hypothetical of just the moment, not how many positions do we need, I mean, the needs might present themselves. I've been on shows where we indeed did need projection and there was nobody on staff. And then on shows where we indeed did not need projection, and we had a designer and an assistant and a great big projection budget. I'm on a show now that actually needs more lighting than scenery, but all the money went to scenery. And it's like all those decisions were made before the team was brought on, and there's nothing to be done now. And so that actually, I feel like it doesn't fall on the creative staff. I feel like that falls on on the management. It's like that. There has to be a creative reading of the play when it's chosen and when that conversation is happening.
That's a tough thing though, because I feel like, for obviously this is not a commercial theater conversation, it's like a regional thing, but that goes way higher up to like the board, because everyone is accountable to somebody else, and the people at the top of that food chain that probably actually have a say in the money have no idea what happens in the rehearsal room. So
They're busy at their day job at Exxon.
oh God help us. Yeah, so like that's an industry wide. See, we've gotten back to complaining about the state of America.
Well,
I didn't even say anything.
one particular
Do
case,
something
the
else.
producer would like to cram 400 seats into a venue, and there's actually no space left for the performance. And that's an actual situation. So that's like, how do we?
I want you to know we did try to get the producer's perspective here. We reached out to multiple alumni, but they're all busy producing at this moment, just to kind of temper that conversation.
They have jobs.
I do want to, I smell pizza in the air, and I want to make sure we get to some time for questions. And I think what will happen is I'm gonna do one more question for the panel, and then we'll get pizza, and then as we're having pizza, we'll have some Q&A directed by you. But the last question I want to ask for the panel here is to talk about New York. We have students, some of whom will be entering the industry after May when they commence. Talk about your relationship to New York and what it means for your career, and could you envision a career starting somewhere that wasn't New York? Some of you did, in fact, have careers that started in a place other than New York. And then connected to that, if you have any insights you would like to share about the relationship between journeyman status, apprenticing, internships, the luxury of internships, all kinds of matters connected to that as they relate to your entrance into the field as professionals. So that was one big sticky rubber band ball question, but I'd love to know your thoughts on that. How many of you started in New York? Yeah, I guess I did, more or less. Anybody not start in New York?
I mean, like, if I've even started. I have so many thoughts on this. I'm going to try and be concise. So yeah, I've been in New York now since October of 2015, with 3 months out of the city doing a fellowship in San Diego. So like, really, I'm still like a huge newbie, and it's dark days, guys. I'm sorry. Like, I was taking the train up here, and I was like, oh man, like, you should be so much more positive. This is totally personal. So like, Godspeed to like everybody who's like, Mary Tyler Moore style, like, woo, Big Apple. Like, I have not felt that way. I don't know how long I am going to be in the city. I don't like it, and I think it's pretty antithetical to the kind of art that I actually want to make. I think New York is about selling a product, and I think that's like, if you like are good at figuring out how to make your art and do that at the same time, then like, more power to you. And like, I'm really terrible at that, and I always have been. And like, there's part of me that like wishes I were way better at it, and there's another part of me that's like, you just got to get out. What I've always wanted, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of like Double Edge Theater in Massachusetts. They're not like, their theater itself, I like kind of am like lukewarm on, but like, that's the setup that I've always wanted in my life. Like, or it happens a bunch in the UK. We don't tend to support the model as much here, but like companies like Propeller or like Emma Rice and Knee High, like, that's what I've always wanted to have in my life. It's like a company in a barn in a place with trees 3 hours outside of an urban center where like I make stuff with people who are cool, and then maybe we tour it to the urban centers, like, if they want to see it. So, like, that's what I want. And the question, like, it has always been and continues to be, like, where's the money going to come from to, like, try and actually make something like that happen? At this particular moment, like I dived into New York because I graduated from YSD and it was like, it seems like you should, which maybe isn't a good enough reason, you know, like just throwing that out there. And it's not, you know, I work in an architecture office. I have about 3 other semi-part-time jobs. The amount of time that I have to write grants and do like my own work is small. It comes at the end of the day, and it comes in a period of time where my brain is like pretty much good for like watching Parks and Rec. So like that, and it's rough. It's like that's how the days break down in the city right now. The thing, I guess, that is encouraging, and this sort of speaks to your last question, is that like I do think, and I think it's happening like just way slowly, but it is happening. Like I do think that there are some companies out there who are starting to sort of like make little like, you know, chinks in the wall of like the giant kind of commercial institutional theater, which really like rules New York. And there are companies like Bedlam and like yeah, they're amazing. Yeah, so there are companies like Bedlam, like you know, Rachel Chavkin and the team have been around for a while, like, you know, and you can see these, or like, you know, Pigpen, which isn't a New York company, but which like, you know, like goes to Williamstown and like has connections to these, you know, places that are like big theater making machines. And it's like watching them is encouraging, right? Because it's like, okay, there is, like, we are reaching, I think, we're reaching like the decadent tipping point of like the way our theater is set up, like regional theater and commercial theater. Like, it's just really like big and bloated and like runs on old white people buying subscriptions. And like, how long can it possibly live? Way, way, way too long is the answer. But like, there are these other things out there. Like there are these small companies out there who are starting to sort of like get a foothold and work in a way that isn't entirely like driven by a kind of like equity showcase contract type of setup. And that's what I have to look to. And I think in the future, I personally am going to be like trying to find ways to look to it outside of New York, because I actually think that like we're way too driven by the idea of New York as like the be all and the end all of where art gets made in this country. I actually think it's where art gets sold. I think that art can get made anywhere. So that might be, you know, what I'm trying to do soon.
Yes. My personal experience might not be that. It's interesting because I moved to New York in 1999, so my personal experience is not relevant, because I'll be like, there's no such thing as YouTube in New York. That would be like how I would describe moving there, because it was 1999. But like, what's interesting, because what Sarah touched on goes to like this what's actually an incredibly deep question about art making that is a kind of a question that you have to answer no matter where you are, and as it's almost something about maturing and like separating the wrong reasons you wanted to become an artist from the right reasons to do it, which are often the opposite. So like, I'm really glad I moved to New York, and I'm really glad that I went to grad school there as opposed to leaving it for grad school, but I was in New York for 6 years before I got produced there. I got produced at some regional theaters first, but I don't think that would have happened. Like, I got produced in like, you know, Florida and like Portland, Oregon. But I don't think that would have happened if I'd been living in Portland, Oregon. Like, Portland Center Stage would not have produced me twice if I were like, I'd written word for word the exact same plays, but was living in Portland. It happened because I was in New York playwright, which is bullshit, but it's important bullshit to know and to take advantage of if it can help you. So in terms of breaking in and getting to a place where I had the luxury to make the kinds of decisions about how I wanted to approach my art, being in New York was important. And I think it's partly because, and this is just speaking as a playwright, the thing you have and the advantage you have over like an actor, and it's also hard for directors because you can't like walk into someone's office and direct for them and be like, look how good I am at this. But with a playwright, you can have the script and hand it to them. And the best people to get your script into the hands of are often in New York, and it's like the center of this web that can spread your work out, and that's really useful. Now, what the problem is, and this is, I think, a big part of what Sarah was alluding to, there aren't a lot of metrics for what success is that are healthy. How much money you're making, how famous you are. None of that has anything to do with either how fulfilled you're actually going to be by the work you're doing, or how close it is to what you really want to express and to connect with other people. And like, hooray, you got this brass ring of a production at, let's say, like Lincoln Center, and then stand out front and watch who's walking in to see your play. It will not be anyone that you wanted to reach. It will be the people that Sarah just described. So like, it almost depends on what kind of a person you are and what kind of environment you'll thrive in. What will feed you in terms of working from the most sort of honorable place in you, that is, exploring the things that are difficult and confusing and painful and that are vulnerable to expose, and struggling to find work and finding the collaborators who will help you tease that out. And that could be in New York, or the environment of New York could kill those voices in you. And it could be, so it's sort of like, and you're young, you guys, you're younger than we are anyway. And so maybe you haven't figured that out yet. And so yeah, New York can be helpful in all kinds of ways, but if you go there, try not to let it kill the voices in you that you should be listening to, because it can. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, totally.
I would say I know a lot of people that are in New York because it's like the place to be, but actually they just, as people, hate it, and it like kills your soul, and you gotta go somewhere else.
I like it there, but it took me like 7 years to feel remotely comfortable. But
I mean, I as just a person in the world would not want to be anywhere else. Now, having said that, I live in Jersey because I'm also Kansas.
Having said that, I don't live there.
Are you
No, I'm not that far. Everybody else. No, I live in Jersey because Manhattan and I get along well. We're not together all the time.
Same distance to Midtown as Brooklyn.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you all about my commute if you want. But anyway, my husband and I both work freelance. He's a stagehand. And for us, we have a totally different experience. Like, I'm not working with a creation that's coming from me. I am a facilitator. And so while I do consider myself an artistic component, and I also want to be artistically fulfilled, I'm being fulfilled on somebody else's something. So for me, I just need a lot of opportunities. And New York is the land of opportunities. So I can choose, so for instance, I just did the Nutcracker at New York City Ballet, and then next week I'm doing a one-day thing for a Nike pop-up event. Like, those two things live in completely different worlds. They pay completely different salaries, and they're with completely different people. But mixing those up is very fulfilling to me. It works great for my schedule. I have a young baby at home, so for me, it's really about how much money can I make in the shortest amount of time? Because that's the place where I am in my life as a person. It wasn't that case 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. So those are all different factors that have changed. And again, it's just being able to have opportunities to kind of grab out of the air and gravitate towards, for me, couldn't happen anywhere else, even in LA or any other big market. I just can't imagine it. And also, not every place needs a stage manager, and if you do, you don't need very many of us. So even regional theaters to work in, you're going to have one, maybe two on staff, and those people tend to stay there for their entire lives. So it's just not a lot of opportunity.
I mean, I moved to when I studied in London for 6 months, and I only came back because it was a round trip ticket. I would have stayed if I could have.
Plus, they make it real hard for us to work there.
They make it hard for us but the concessions, I saw so many shows, I felt like I was a part of the arts community immediately. So when I graduated from undergrad, I moved to New York because it's the only place that I felt like I could walk down the street. You can legitimately walk down the street, meet somebody you don't know, say you do something, and they might call you. They actually might. And I do, in addition to lighting and set design, I do a lot of other things. Everybody's got a side hustle. And I do a lot of other things on the side. And it is the land of opportunity. You never know who you'll run into. And there are lots of opportunities to run into lots of different people all over the place. I recently went through a burnout on New York City and realized that I just need to get out of the city more. And I need to go to places that are like the antecedent, like
Jersey,
Los Angeles.
I'm pro Jersey faction.
Like we need to get as far, like we need to be the opposite of everything New York is. I need green sunlight, palm trees, and people who are high as the sky. So like
That's not the opposite of New York.
I mean, so in my field, I don't think I could be anywhere else. I remember I tried to get a job at Yale Theater Studies in Rochester, and the answer was not that I was too young. It was that, well, we hired New York designers. And when I was younger, I was like, what does that even mean? Like, but now being in New York, I'd say that 70% of my work comes from somewhere else in the country. It's all over the place, everywhere else in the country, but it's from everywhere else. I am lucky enough and blessed enough to have found two companies that I like working for. They make work that I like. It's a lot of original work, and it's stuff that resonates with me, and they are both based in New York. If you can find a company like that, I'd say that that's anywhere, wherever it is, that's worth working for. I can't stand the regional theater two-hander where, you know, that's the play we're going to do, and every other regional theater's done it, and you know it comes creaking around every 3 seasons. And what are we going to do with it this time? That bugs me. That's my answer.
One other really, really quick thing, I'm sorry, I know there's pizza, that I'd say is that like self-producing is just massively hard. And like that's what's a little bit different, I think, about where I am as opposed to like being a lighting designer or being a stage manager or being someone who's like gonna like, you know, who maybe is gonna walk down the street and like find a production and like meet someone like work on that production. Like I am at the place of being like, if you want to do the show, then like get the space, get the company, get the money, get the like, you know, like, and it's all on me. And New York is notoriously short on space. And huge on money that it doesn't want to give you. So that's a different, you know, like, so that's another question. I think if you're somebody who is trying to freelance, then yes, like the wealth that New York offers is like unparalleled and potentially overwhelming, but like kind of great. If you're somebody who like is actually trying to like self-produce, it can be really challenging.
I mean, I also like to point out that you said something about a director being able to walk in and direct.
Yeah.
I feel like I can't tell if it's harder for a director to get a job or harder for a designer to get a job, because I can't show what I do. I have never gotten a job by someone looking at my portfolio. It's always been someone who saw something 18 months ago, and I only get that opportunity when the director has already fought to get the show, and then I got the slot on the team. Mm-hmm. Like that's, so like New York, it's like how many teams can I get on, because
Right.
Relationships.
Relationships are huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever gotten a job from a resume. It's all word of mouth.
Not that you shouldn't have one, but
Yeah, I mean, everyone wants to see it. I don't know what they do with it. But.
Yeah, no, that's so real though. I mean, like, I don't know what they do with it, especially for me.
There's a room in New York that's just full
Yeah,
of resumes.
exactly. Yeah, it's like Indiana Jones. It's like with the Lost Ark. Yeah, just like totally. I mean, especially for directors, because you don't. I mean, nobody wants to like. I'm the most dangerous, right? Like, I have the potential to fuck up the most stuff. Like, you know, and like I still look very young at least, right? So it's like it's very hard to walk into a room and be like, put me in charge of every single other person you're paying. You know.
Okay, so let's have some pizza. I hope you'll stick around. Just we're allowed to eat in those seats, right, Mike? Or do we have to?
Yeah. Well.
Great. So, get some food, sit down, and then we're going to turn it over to you to ask questions. Yeah.
So it'll be a little less formal. People can eat. You guys can eat as well, because I'll turn the cameras off, so you don't have to worry about it. And thank you, and just so we have it for the record, thank the panel very much.
Thank you.